Welcome back to another edition of the Here We Go podcast. I am your host, Trent Ging. Today, I am going to be talking about Justin Fields QB1. Now, honestly, was going to save this for a little bit of a later date, but I just kind of feel like right now where we're standing, it feels like a deal is going to get done sooner rather than later with Justin. I think the team is going to be motivated to bring him back. I think the comments that we heard from Mike Tomlin talking about Justin Fields kind of lends you to believe that he's coming back. I also think that, the Steelers, to me, feel like they're going to move on from Russell Wilson. If the story that we heard from Mark Cabali, many of you on X, I'm sure, have read that story at this point. If he and Arthur Smith are not getting along, whether Mike Tomlin wants to bring him back or not, it just may not make sense. And the other side of this is, quite frankly, Russ just did not play that good down the stretch. I mean, he really didn't. Guy was brought here to take us through a playoff game, win a playoff game, make us a contender for the Super Bowl. None of that clearly happened. Once we hit the teeth of the schedule where all the playoff teams came along, it was evident that whether you want to blame Russ directly or indirectly, it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, the team just didn't perform. Once we hit that gauntlet of Eagles, Ravens, Chiefs, and then getting back down to even the Cincinnati game, and then again in Baltimore, we averaged 10 points less a game during that stretch than we had in the previous, 6 games under Russell Wilson. 7 games. I'm sorry, 5 games. It was previous 5 games. So I don't see practically how you bring that guy back, especially to me, if he's over $20 million, it's not worthwhile. So I plan to save some of the larger debate of this for a different episode, but just kind of getting into some of the very basics of this thing. Is Russell Wilson a better passer? Everybody's going to say yes. Look what happened in the yards per game. Look at the points per game. The offense opened up under Russell Wilson. And that's true. In my opinion, so did the playbook. And the offensive line in the games where Russ really took off had played better than what they were doing with Justin Fields. So I think you see something twofold happening right there. Number one, the offense definitely opened the playbook up. You saw more deep shots downfield. I think the offense quit playing so conservatively. You saw more of a mix in the route tree than I think you'd seen in the previous games when Justin had played his first 6 games. The second thing, I think there was so much of the offensive line being in flux when Justin was there. Obviously, we had the whole Broderick Jones, Troy Falatanu situation. And then Falatanu goes down for the season. And then you have, even something dating back to camp where Justin Fields worked a lot, not with Zach Frazier. He actually worked with Nate Herbig. And then Herbig goes down for the season. Now, I'm not saying that maybe led to a lot of the snapping issues, the fumbles and things of that nature, but the facts are the facts. He was working with that guy primarily, and Zach Frazier was more of the backup, the second team guy. So you had a change there. And then shortly after that, James Daniels goes down for the season. You have Spencer Anderson starting when Isaac Seumalo was out. Outside of Dan Moore, there was literally no continuity in the offensive line that whole first 4 games of the season, the entire preseason, and dating back into camp. So like I said, I really think that a big part of this is that the offensive line was better under Russell Wilson. They weren't better in terms of looking at this being, we were a really good offensive line unit, but they were better than what they were under Justin Fields. So I don't think there's any denying that. So just the fact that they had more continuity alone should lead you to believe that they there were some limitations, and I'm sure part of it was that the team just didn't trust Justin not to turn the ball over, so they did play more conservatively. I think the other side of that coin, though, was just that the offensive line was that bad, and there was no continuity, and they're changing guys every game. In Brother Jones' case, sometimes throughout the game, you know what I mean. It was kind of a nightmare scenario, if we're going to be honest with ourselves. And we jump out to a 4-2 record. Now we did lose to two teams we shouldn't have lost to, with the Dallas and the Indianapolis Colts. But having said that, I think you can safely say the second half of that Colts game was maybe one of the better games of Justin's career. I mean, he really was starting to turn it loose, and he was the entire offense throughout the second half of that game. Another side to this isn't necessarily whether or not Justin is better than Russ or whether Russ is better than Justin. It's very obvious that just Russ doesn't have it, in my opinion. I think Russ looks like a guy that's just kind of washed. His mobility's not there. Later in the season, it felt like he felt like he had more mobility than what he had, and I think it ran him into trouble quite a few times. Took some sacks. Thought he could run for more than what he was getting. He had some nice runs, though. Honestly, I mean, that Baltimore run was a fantastic run. There was no one there, but still would have been a huge play. But I just think that the mobility looked like it was diminishing on Russ, and it didn't look like he kind of came to terms with that at the time, which made it very difficult because, again, I feel like that's part of why he started holding the ball more. He kept looking for the deep shots, the home run balls, and really, you can say what you want, but the dude did not use the intermediate part of the field at all. I mean, at all. It was really home run ball or check down, and he did not work through progression. So one of the biggest knocks on Justin Fields, and Colin and I talked about this a ton, was just that he's not a guy who reads defenses. He's not a guy who goes through progressions. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't know that Russell Wilson was doing either of those things either. The one thing that he has that Justin doesn't, and he puts much more touch on the ball on these downfield shots. That's something that Justin, I hope, took away during his time sitting, because I think that would be something that would be absolutely massive if he learned that from Russ and can understand how to start to utilize that, work in that in the offseason. I think another piece of this is just the simple fact that Justin is 10 years younger. His ceiling is much higher than Russ's ceiling at this point. Yes, Russ has a higher floor, but the ceiling is still there for Justin Fields. It's a matter of whether or not he can ever reach that ceiling. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know that that's going to happen, because I don't, because there's just been so many inconsistencies throughout his career. Chicago is an obvious dumpster fire. It just has not been friendly to a rookie quarterback. I mean, even Caleb Williams, the dude took a ton of sacks this year. Everybody talked about, Justin Fields took a ton of sacks. Caleb Williams was your generational rookie. He took a ton of sacks. It's the organizational flaws. He went through 3 offensive coordinators in 4 seasons. Well, he's motivated to stay in the same system and see what happens in a year or two. It's crazy difficult for these young guys to continue to just churn over one system after another, learn new language, and it's like you never get a grasp on anything before you're actually just resetting and starting all over again and relearning everything you thought you knew. It's insane to think a guy's going to have success that way. But another piece that I worry about is, obviously, there's 2 sides to the coin of where I want this to go. The first side of that coin, I want Justin Fields to be signed early, which is kind of why I'm doing this video now rather than waiting on doing this in more of a group setting with Colin and Lowry. But I really think this could get done sooner rather than later, especially if you start hearing and reading between the tea leaves that are happening right now. But I also think I worry a little bit about, if you do sign Justin Fields early, does it scare away a guy like T. Higgins? Justin's not going to be anywhere near Joe Burrow, no matter what he does. He's just not Joe Burrow. So if you're a guy like T. Higgins, in the contract money, years, whatever, as long as the guarantees, I should say that, because really the guarantees is all that matters to these guys. If the guaranteed money is very similar between Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, it's a no-brainer. He's going to go back to Cincinnati because Justin Fields is going to give him the level of production that Joe Burrow will. So I think that could be somewhat of a negative that comes out of this whole thing. Would you settle for a guy who's not maybe T. Higgins? Darius Slayton would be a guy who would be out there, a guy that was heavily talked about down at the trade deadline. And there was a lot of people who had mixed emotions about him at the time. And I started looking a little bit more into him at that time because I quite honestly, I knew Darius Slayton, but I never really looked at like his height, weight, speed, all that stuff. So I started looking a little bit more into that during the trade deadline. He's actually a little bigger than I thought he was, which made him a lot more appealing to me because I do feel like we need to get more athletic on offense. We have a Pat Freiermuth who's not an athletic tight end. He's a great possession tight end. I think he's a very capable possession tight end. I thought that's why we paid him, right? I mean, but he's not going to be your Travis Kelce, Brock Bowers type of tight end in the NFL. It's just not who he is, and that's fine. That's okay. Everybody doesn't have to be Travis Kelce or Jimmy Graham or Antonio Gates or Brock Bowers. I mean, there are guys who have to be, solid possession receiving tight ends that when you need a first down and it's third down, he's your go-to guy. And I think can be that in this offense if he's utilized more like he was late in the season than what he was throughout most of the season. I think that a guy like Slayton can give you not only the speed, but he's got a little size and physicality to him as well. The biggest knock on him is he will drop the ball. I mean, he does have a fair number of drops in his career. That does tend to drive the Yinzers a little bit crazy. So I completely understand if everybody's got some reservations from that front. Another name that would be really intriguing to me, I don't know that this would necessarily happen. He's not the youngest guy in the group. Amari Cooper would be out there. But my point to this was simply that are these guys going to be attracted to play with Justin Fields being a quarterback? And that's kind of the unknown. I would say in T. Higgins' case, the answer is absolutely not. Darius Slayton's already played with some pretty bad quarterbacks. I'm not sure that's going to be high on his priority list. A guy like, Amari Cooper, who he just played with Deshaun Watson, we're not going to get worse than that. So, I don't know how high on the priority list that will be for him. Could be just because he doesn't want to go down that road again. We'll see. But that would be one negative I could see coming out of this with Justin Fields is just that his perception around the league may be that he's just not that great of a quarterback. And you're going to see quite a lot more running in football from that offense than throwing the football. So as a wide receiver, is that attractive to you? I don't know. I mean, I think you still let that play out because here's ultimately what I think is going to really make a big difference in this. It's the fact that if you have Justin Fields locked up for this year and you just ride this out, I don't want him and Russ back. Do not want that to happen. Russ can walk. He's going to command too much money, first of all, especially for the play he gave us. Ride it out with Justin Fields. You find out what you got. Either he is exactly what you hope he could be, or he's not. Put the money that you're going to save by going with a guy like Justin Fields and taking that chance into building this roster out to where it needs to be. And in 2026, if Justin is not the guy, move up in the draft and go get somebody. This quarterback class is not good coming in. You can go clear back to the early preseason when Colin and I were talking about this class and the free agents that would be available. Dak obviously has been locked up at this point. But even clear back in that episode before the season started, we said, next year we're kind of screwed as a fan base. There's just not that many options there unless a guy like Dak Prescott just completely gets let go from Dallas. He would cost a ton of money. We all knew that. He ended up costing them a ton of money. So Colin and I were right spot on with pretty close, actually, I think, to where we were talking about the contracts being. So sign the cheap guy in Justin Fields and just ride it out and see what you get out of him. You never know. You may get surprised. Maybe he's that guy who's that turnaround candidate that get, comeback player of the year type guy that leads your team to actually having a solid season beyond just being above 500. Maybe he accidentally wins a playoff game. Who knows? Build your roster up, because we had cheaper, obviously, I think the cheapest quarterback room by far in the NFL this past year. Justin can give you an option to have another cheap quarterback room, right? So put that money into something else. Put that money into the free agent wide receiver. Start building some money into the offense. I don't think this would happen, but it would give you a chance to pay Najee Harris. I mean, at this point, I think everybody's under the assumption he's moving on. And I'm not saying that's the wrong assumption, because at this point, I love Najee Harris. I would really like to have him back. I'm not paying him more than what they were going to get on the first fifth-year option, so they already turned it down, and that pretty much was the writing on the wall for me. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality. I think you're going to draft a guy. I think, honestly, as deep as this class is, I'd be really upset if they draft a guy before the 4th round, because I think there's other needs. Maybe you pay a corner. Maybe you draft a corner. I honestly believe there's so many holes that you could fill on this team by just not paying a guy like Russell Wilson just to be good enough. Because good enough isn't good enough anymore. And I'm not honestly convinced that Russell Wilson's going to win me any more games than Justin Fields would next year. If you build the roster out correctly and use the money wisely rather than dumping it all into quarterback who's going to be 37 years old and clearly losing some of what he used to be, I think you're throwing your money away. I think you really need to look at building the rest of the roster out, putting together as close to a complete team by the time you hit free agency and this draft class. And what we've seen in the last 2 draft classes, I don't think it's unreasonable to think you can hit on 4 straight picks, because we've been hitting on quite a few. I know people are going to be hard on Broderick Jones. He was not going to be a year 1 and 2 guy who dominated. He was inexperienced. He's still going to be fine. Calm down. I think it's safe to say that Keanu Benton looks like he's a star in the making. But I do not think he's a 1 tech. I think he's a 3 tech. I think he needs to take Larry Ogunjobi's place next year. So we'll get into that later. Nick Herbig, definite hit, right? Darnell Washington, definite hit. Nice player. We don't know what we have in Roman Wilson. He missed his entire rookie season. Can't do anything about that. Troy Falatani played 1 game. Looked great in that 1 game. I think it's safe to say he's going to be your left tackle of the future for the time being. You can build out a draft just like that. Same 2 draft classes that Omar Khan has directly been involved with. Get some free agent pieces, and we can run this back with Justin Fields and have at least as good of a season as we did this year. I'm not convinced Russell Wilson would take us any further at this point. So I think the smart move is ride with Justin Fields. I do not want to go with another 35, 33-year-old quarterback. The Derek Carrs of the world. Is Derek Carr probably a better quarterback than Justin Fields? Sure. Probably. I mean, Was he really that good in New Orleans? No, he wasn't. Do you want Sam Darnold because he had one good year since he's been in the NFL and fell apart in the playoff? I don't, because we don't have the weapons that he has. You're not going to have the best receiver in the NFL, plus Jordan Addison, plus TJ Hawkinson, plus two good running backs. We don't have that here. You have George Pickens and company, Jalen Warren. Like, it's not the same. Jalen Warren is not Aaron Jones. So, no, I don't want Sam Darnold. I didn't want Sam Darnold, honestly, quite frankly, when everything was going right. So I definitely don't want him after that playoff game. Other names that are being thrown out there. I mean, Aaron Rodgers. Did anybody watch the Jets this year? Probably not, because they sucked that bad and he was a big part of it. So no, pass. I mean, who else is out there? This is such a bad market. Do you want Jameis Winston? You want a guy who's going to light up somebody for 400 yards and throw 5 touchdowns, and the following week he throws for $120 and throws 5 interceptions? Pass. The market's dry. And there's too many needs on this team to look at projects in the 3rd round. I think we need to use our picks very wisely. You're going to need a corner. You're going to need a wide receiver 2 or 1, maybe. I think you're going to need an interior defensive lineman, particularly probably a 1-tech, in my opinion. So I'm not drafting a quarterback in this class. They're probably not going to be very good anyway. So kind of all I had today. Again, I'll probably end up talking about this a little bit more once we get on with Colin and Lowry here tomorrow, but I just really wanted to get this out there because I have a feeling there's going to be a contract coming faster than we realize. So just so much chatter going on, and you know, guys like Gary Dulac who's talking about this being a possibility. Alan Saunders has put things out there that it's a possibility Justin Fields could be done sooner than we think. Tomlin, his press conference was very telling. I just really think the Russell Wilson train's left down. He just hasn't found out yet. And I really feel like they're going to turn the keys of the kingdom over to Justin Fields this year and just see what we got, because the options just are so limited and there's not much you can do about it. So be in for another wild ride this year, Steeler fans, because it's early in the offseason and we're already kind of screwed at quarterback. So we'll see what happens. I hope Justin Fields. I love Justin Fields from the days at Ohio State. I hope he becomes the guy that he always had the potential to be, but it's a far cry from where he's at right now. So as always, I hope you guys like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. I hope you like the content. It's going to be the off season. There's a lot of fun stuff to talk about in the off season. So I hope you turn into all the live sessions and comment along and ask some questions and all that good stuff as we go. Hope you all have a great evening.